parallel lives. I have been to Paris, Bernard. I have seen your banlieue. These are not cosmopolitan. These are single racial entities where they live separate lives in the same city.
How can you select that?
Well,
At
because
the border,
you're here.
one is okay, the other is not?
No.
I would like to make a point to Mr. Murray, and I would like to ask you why you feel that the presence of 1 or 2 or 1,000 people with a different identity within a society threatens the identity of the people who were in the society originally. Whether you believe that is a legitimate concern or a primary.
There are moments in a public discussion when someone says the very thing everyone in the room is carefully stepping around. And who else dares that role on himself when Douglas Murray is in the same room? Here's a rare moment. Douglas flew to Greece for a special session and intellectually humiliated his host in front of everyone. Let's get into it.
Which was integrated with the Henry Jackson Society, described by some as a right-winger. He's also the author of several respected books, including Neoconservatism, Why We Need It. Your time starts now.
Well, thank you very much. First of all, I should just lance a potential boil, I think, that may be present. It's not going to be my contention tonight. I don't think it's going to be my side's contention that immigration is only a bad thing, that it only brings negatives. Of course, immigration has historically and can still bring some good things. Legal and illegal immigration, for instance, are totally separate things. The law is on one side and not on the other. Economic migration is one very distinct thing and very separate, for instance, from asylum. It is my belief that Europe should remain open to asylum seekers, that people who are genuinely fleeing persecution in other places should be able to find a sanctuary in Europe. So that is not one of the things that this side is going to be arguing against tonight.
Before a single opposing argument is made, Murray does something that immediately separates this from a typical immigration panel. He draws his own lines. He says plainly what his true beliefs are. You can see he is not arguing Europe should shut its doors to genuine refugees. He says this first, unprompted, before anyone accuses him of it. This is strategic housekeeping, and it's important. By defining what he is not arguing, he forces every attempt to misrepresent him to look lazy. It's the rhetorical equivalent of walking into a room and moving all the furniture before anyone tries to rearrange it on you.
Of course, there has been some immigration across history on our continent. There have been Huguenots, Jews in Britain, we had Ugandan Asians. All of these things have gone on for many years, but not at all on the scale which we have seen in recent years. So we are talking about a scale that is totally different from anything that has gone before. And there's an additional point. All the politicians have got it wrong. All of them. All of their predictions have been wrong. Every time they have made a pronouncement about this, it has been wrong. In my country, we were told that when Poland and Polish workers were going to be allowed to come in, the Labour government said it'll be a few thousand, 650,000. That is an enormous magnitude to get something wrong, even for government. The recent census that's just been published at the end of last year in Britain demonstrated this. People who identify, after this massive period of mass immigration, people who identify themselves as white British people are now a minority in their capital city of London.
He made a simple observation about magnitude. And if you paid close attention, you'd know it's not so simple. The Labour government predicted a few thousand Polish workers would arrive when Poland joined the EU. 650,000 came. That is not a rounding error. That is a government being wrong by a factor that in any other policy domain would end careers and trigger inquiries.
We cannot expect that this will not have political consequences, and we cannot expect that people across Europe aren't going to feel something about that. If you become a minority in your own city, you are going to feel something about that. Of course, there are not only bad things that come from this, but there are some distinctly bad things that come from it. We have the problem, additionally, when migration happens at this speed, of the problem of integrating people. I wish it were possible to integrate people. I think it is possible to integrate people into Europe. But there is no way you can do it when you have this speed and this scale of migration. That is not when you get integration, that is when you get parallel communities and parallel lives. It is the right, I would contend, of European people, just like people from everywhere else in the world, to have an identity. To have an identity, to be able to be proud of it, to be able to wish to protect it, and not to be called names, including the worst names going, for having that identity and wishing.
People identifying as white British are now a minority in their own capital city. And here's what Murray says next that cuts through everything. We cannot expect this will have no political consequences. That is not a threat. That is an observation. Societies change when their composition changes. That has been true since Rome absorbed the Visigoths, since the French Huguenots transformed English commerce, since the partition of British India reshaped the demographics of Birmingham and Bradford. Demographic change has always produced political consequences. Pretending otherwise isn't sophistication, it's willful blindness. You don't move into someone else's house and then make demands.
You will hear tonight, I make a prediction here. I'm not a politician, I can afford to do it. I make a prediction. The other side will tell you that nothing can be done. That mass migration is something which we're just going to have to live with. That it is impossible to deal with. I think this is dangerous. Very, very dangerous.
The integration argument arrives here, and it deserves to be heard carefully because it is not what critics of Murray usually claim it is. The position is not that immigrants cannot integrate. The position is that integration requires time, at a speed that allows genuine contact between communities. When migration happens faster than any society can absorb it, you don't get integration. You get parallel communities. You get areas of Paris that Murray will name specifically later in the debate. Murray is making a structural argument about democratic health, not just an argument about immigration. And then comes the most politically important point in his entire opening.
It is a dangerous thing to say when public opinion across Europe wants something to be done, that nothing can be done. Democracies and democratic governments and classes have to respond to the desires of the people. They have to address them and they have to do something about it. We have to end the era of nothing can be done. If this is not dealt with by the mainstream, if this is not dealt with on the centre-left, on the centre-right, by people in the mainstream of politics, this territory, this ground will be given over to extremists. I very much hope that is not done. I think that we have the chance still to deal with this in a mainstream democratic way. I am not arguing, our side is not arguing that we slam, or we should slam, the door of immigration shut. I am certainly not arguing that we should lock that door. But at the very least, we need to give that door a firm but gentle push. Thank you.
Just as Murray rounds up, the first set of questions throng in. And believe me, they came for his neck.
My name is Christina Poulit, and I would like the part for the motion. If your name was Hassan and you were born in Syria nowadays, how would you argue tonight, frankly speaking?
I would like to make a point to Mr. Murray, and I would like to ask you why you feel that the presence of 1 or 2 or 1,000 people with a different identity within a society threatens the identity of the people who were in the society originally. Whether you believe that is a legitimate concern or a primal fear, and whether you agree that when a primal fear drives a crowd, they become a mob, and that a politician should follow a mob and not provide leadership by calming the mob down and giving them a reason.
Thank you. And towards the back.
I am against the motion, and I would like to say that the European Union was an ex-colonial power, so most of the countries of the Third World were exploited from us. So now we cannot say that we don't accept them, because most of their riches and their wealth were taken from us. And Mr. Voridis talked about our values as European citizens, as humans. Well, I think globalization takes them from us and not immigrants.
Douglas.
The questions are a humanizing tactic designed to make the abstract look like a personal concern. But watch out, because Murray's answers are clean and without apology.
Response particularly to that challenge to you.
Very quickly. First of all, if I were Hassan in Syria, I would hope, among other things, that I would help to rebuild my country after the Assad dynasty had wrecked it so completely. I'd hope that I would stay and help to rebuild the country after the devastation caused by that family. Secondly,
Douglas takes a coherent position. The countries people flee from do not rebuild themselves when their educated, able-bodied population permanently relocates to Europe. The brain drain from the developing world is itself a crisis that the open borders position tends to somehow ignore.
The gentleman here who said, why are you threatened by one or two people? I'm not threatened by one or two people. Nobody is threatened by one or two people. The figures I gave you showed we're not talking about one or two people. The figure I gave you at the very beginning was that people who identify as white British citizens are now a minority in their capital cities. So we're not talking about one or two people, and it is very disingenuous to pretend that I was.
Concerning the colonial crimes, Murray's response is the one that makes the room uncomfortable in the best possible way. He doesn't deny colonial crimes. He instead takes a different approach.
The lady at the back, you say colonialism. I'd like to return the question to you. I don't deny the crimes of colonialism, not for a moment. I'd like to ask you a question. How long do former colonial countries have to be punished for then? One of the largest and most significant and longest colonial powers in history was the Turkish Empire. Do we do this to Turkey? Do we say to Turkey, you must have your identity erased as well as punishment for the past? Almost every single people in the world at some point has done something historically they could be punished for. But why, I wonder, is it that it is Europeans that we are always being heard, being offered that choice?
Douglas Murray, thank you. Before we go to Makis Faridis, Bernard Kouchner.
This is not a colonial problem, but we have particular relation between the former colonialist power and the former colonies. We have a double responsibility. That's why, including shutting the borders for them, it's impossible. But this is a moral reason. Practically, really practically, you cannot close the border. It has been tried several times, 1,000 times.
Makis Faridis, some challenges there from the floor.
The question, the identity issue. First of all, could you or would you accept that there could be identity clashes? Or should we accept it in a cultural relativist way? Or would you react the same, for example, if there are traditions who treat women inhumanly in a way that are completely negative and alien to our tradition?
The question lands like a thud because it's unanswerable without immediately exposing the double standard. Muslims never bring up the Ottoman Empire when the subject of historical atrocities arises. But European colonialism is apparently a perpetual liability with no statute of limitations and no equivalent claims on anyone else. No Islamist colonial regime has ever repented for its past or present actions. If you carry guilt on your shoulders, others will use it to dump their own sins onto you. That observation, made in the comments, is exactly what Murray is pointing at. And just when Douglas thinks he's heard enough absurdities for one day, the host throws this at him.
Country, but not overnight. And certainly not with the public opinion in times of crisis like now. So it takes time. But of course, the right of vote in some European countries is already accepted. In others, like mine, not enough. And we'll see. But you cannot ask...
The accusation is hypocrisy there.
Yes, but hypocrisy is not the good word. Hypocrisy is to say that we'll close the door, as in fact we already closed the door since several years without any success. That is hypocrisy. And in a political campaign, you say, oh, but with me, no more migrants. Yes, madam, yes, sir. No, this is not true. That is hypocrisy.
I take your point that ideally this should be the case. Everybody should be completely equal to anybody else. I think we should not forget this, but we have to make sure that we adopt the steps that will get us there and not to hell backwards. So I can see that there can be some tactic movement.
Douglas Murray.
Can I come back on that? I like the fact that migration has occurred. What I do not like, and what a lot of people do not like, is when instead of cosmopolitanism, you get such mass migration as we have had in recent years, that you have parallel communities, parallel lives. I have been to Paris, Bernard. I have seen your banlieue. These are not cosmopolitan. These are single racial entities where they live separate lives in the same city.
How can you select that?
Well,
At the
because you're
border?
here.
One is okay, the other is not?
No.
Man, no, you have to work in their country. Exchange your immigration to going there, develop the countries with them, etc. This is one of the recipe, but it takes time and other.
Okay, can I?
When the same volume of migration that once occurred over centuries is now compressed into a few years, the receiving society has no mechanism to absorb it. No language classes, no civic institutions, no inter-community contact can keep pace. Then comes the Greece argument, which is actually one of the most brutally honest moments in the entire debate.
Because there was a question about are there solutions, are there any solutions? And you made an argument that actually what's happening is inevitable. I mean, and we can't stop it, we just try to slow it down, but it's inevitable. I'm saying no, it's not inevitable, it can be done. We can regulate migration, and to tell you the truth, there are many, many solutions. One of it, and yes, on the question of hypocrisy, I'll tell you one hypocrisy. The hypocrisy of EU, which actually puts all the burden in Greece, saying that we must handle all the possible immigration in the best possible way. But if you ask the EU that they share the burden, and I agree there with Bernard, but they won't accept it. And of course there should be border controls. We should control, and we can control.
We are controlling every day.
But I'll give you the Greek experience. Until recently, the control was only verbal and legal, but not actual. When we actually started controlling, we got results. We got results.
And
very
so you share
specific
with me,
results.
You share with me the idea of sharing among all the European countries, which was not the case.
That's the only one I share. Yeah.
The EU told Greece to handle migration at its borders while refusing to share the burden equitably across member states. When Greece actually enforced those borders, the numbers dropped. The argument that borders cannot be controlled is exposed here not as a truth, but as a choice, specifically a choice made by people who don't live anywhere near those borders and will never feel the consequences of leaving them open.
So easy.
I would like to raise the point that the fear of the other and the unfamiliar is being politically promoted at a time of crisis as a substitute for dealing with the crisis, as a personification and shifting the blame for the crisis to those least able to answer back. Don't do that mistake, please.
So very quickly, I don't think, can I just very quickly, I'm noticing this. I don't see the crisis being blamed on immigrants, and quite rightly not. The crisis, as I see it in Europe, is mainly blamed on bankers. It's mainly blamed on financiers. I mean, maybe we're watching different debates.
Let's talk about migration. Please, who's got the microphone up there?
Hello, I'm Vasilis Papadopoulos. I'm currently undecided, and I would like to address Douglas Murray. Since he mentioned two completely different things, which is actually true about cities immigrants are arriving in. Are there two different societies, two parallel societies, or are the actual locals losing their identity? How are they losing it if there are two different and parallel societies?
Douglas Murray, quickly.
I'd like to just come back to the point I was trying to make, which is this, is that you can integrate people if you have integration at the if you have immigration at the kind of speed which it did go through in centuries past. But if you have migration at the speed at which it is now happening, the examples I gave, the same amount of immigration every couple of weeks, every couple of months, as was happening across centuries before, then you cannot integrate people. Then you have no hope of integrating people. Then people will come in, they will not have to meet anyone from the society they are going into, and they will lead parallel lives. And there are all sorts of miseries that come from.
Murray's answer cuts through the false choice. Both things can be true simultaneously. And the reason both things are true is speed. Integration is not impossible. Integration at this pace, at this volume, with this little political will behind it is. No one ever gets tired of watching him mop the floor with hypocrisy. And in this room in Athens, surrounded by people who came ready to talk about European guilt and colonial debt, he did exactly that, with evidence and without ever once raising his voice. Kindly comment and share if you found this insightful.